So on today's episode, I've got the perfect deck for you if you've got $10 and you want to annoy your friends with that $10 for one reason or another. I'm not asking questions on why you want to do this. I'm just saying that if you do want to annoy your friends for $10, I've got the deck for you. So of course, this deck is very budget friendly, and if you're looking for the deck list link, you can find that in the description below. And now with all that said, let's jump into it. And the commander that I selected for this annoying deck is Cardur Doomscourge. Cardur is a 4/3 Demon Berserker that costs 2 black-red, and it has, when it enters the battlefield, until your next turn, creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able, and attack a player other than you if able. And on top of that, whenever an attacking creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So basically, this is a mass goat effect for all of your opponent's creatures, but even more so because it even counts creatures that actually aren't even in play yet. So if, say, your opponent plays a hasty creature on their turn, well, they need to take that and swing it at one of your other opponents. Yeah, this is an incredible effect on an ETB, and it can cause a ton of chaos, forcing your opponents to attack each other and do all your dirty work for you. And of course, when those attacking creatures die, and believe me, they will, then everyone else starts losing a ton of life and you start gaining a ton of life. Now, this happening once is a bit of an inconvenience for your opponents, but I wouldn't necessarily call it annoying. What is annoying, though, and incredibly effective, is this happening on basically every single turn. Your opponents will not be able to stop and think because it is going to be an all-out onslaught, chaotic time, attacking everywhere else except for you. Because we are going to get this ETB again and again and again and again and again. So your opponents can weaken each other, take each other out, and then when there's one last one standing, well, you can finish that player off. So yeah, there are a lot of spicy and of course plenty of annoying things that you can do this commander, and now let's find out how exactly we go about doing this. By quickly first talking about how we're going to set ourselves up with ramp with cards like Everflowing Chalice, Fire Diamond, and Charcoal Diamond. Everflowing Chalice has multi-kicker 2, it's going to battlefield that many charge counters on it. It can tap to add a colorless for each charge counter on it. Whereas Fire Diamond and Charcoal Diamond are both going to enter battlefield tapped, it can tap for one of our 2 colors. Next up, we've got Ebony Fly, which enters battlefield tapped, taps for a color, so we can actually make it into a fly, and when it attacks, we can give a creature flying, so yeah, that can help us get our creatures through. And we actually can utilize creatures in a different way, and we'll talk about that here in a bit, but yeah, that's why we're also running Fountain of Ichor, which can tap for 1 mana of any color, and we can pay 3 to make into a 3/3 dinosaur artifact creature until end of turn. But next up, we've got a newer card with Lantern of Reveling. It can tap for 1 mana of any color, and by paying 4 and tapping it, we look at the top card of our library. If it's a land, it goes into play tapped. If not, we can put it on the bottom of our library. Moving on, we've got 3 more mana rocks that can tap for any of our colors, and Commander Sphere we can sacrifice to draw a card. Letter of Acceptance we can do the same if we pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice it to do so, and Honor Heirloom we can pay 2 to tap to exile target card from a graveyard. So this can be very effective against graveyard-centric decks. And finally, we're going to be running Unstable Obelisk, which might just tap for a colorless, but it also has pay 7, tap, sacrifice it, destroy target permanent. So early in the game, this can ramp us, and later in the game, this can be a great way to get rid of something that we really don't want on the board. But now that we've talked about setting ourselves up with ramp, how do we really take advantage of our commander's ETB? First up, let's talk about some fantastic ways to make copies of our commander with cards like Twin Flame, Jaxus the Troublemaker, and Fellhide Spirit Binder. Twin Flame is finally budget-friendly again for its most recent reprinting in Double Masters. Regardless, it says choose any number of target creatures you control. For each of them, put a token that's a copy of that creature on the battlefield. Those tokens have haste, exile them begin the next end step, and it has a strive cost 4/2 in red. But regardless, the vast majority of the time, we're probably just going to be paying 2 mana for this, making a copy of our commander that is obviously going to be sacrificed, because of the legend rule just automatically, but we still get its ETB. So basically, again, this is like a 2-mana mass goad everyone else's creatures. And for even less mana, though, we've got Jaxus the Troublemaker. Well, the ability is less mana. Pay a red, tap, discard a card, create a token that's a copy of the target creature you control. It gains haste, and when this creature dies, draw a card. Sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. Activate only as a sorcery. This is pretty incredible. Basically, it's just a looting effect for us because we discard that card, get a copy of our commander, which again automatically dies, but we get its ETB, and we draw a card. So yeah, a fantastic repeatable way to make copies of our commanders. Speaking of which, how about Fellhide Spirit Binder, which has, when it becomes untapped, you may pay 1 in red. If you do, put a token on the battlefield that's a copy of another target creature, except it's in enchantment districts to other types. It has haste, exile, begin the next end step. With our opponents being, a little busy having to swing out at all of our other opponents, we're gonna have some opportunities to swing through at them with this so that we can untap it to get that trigger, to then go their creatures again, to then swing again, and you see where this is going. Now, as good as these cards are, there is one, in my opinion, that stands above the rest, and that is the Golden Pig of this deck, which is the #1 card out of our 99. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Mirage Phalanx. It's a 4/4 human soldier with soul bond that costs 4 red, and it has, as long as it's paired with another creature, each of those creatures has at the beginning of combat on your turn create a token that's a copy of this creature, except it has haste and loses soul bond, exile at the end of combat. So with our commander, this essentially is, hey, every turn let's just get a copy of our commander and get that ETB. Yeah, we lose out on the, token, it dies, who cares? We get that ETB every single one of our turns. So as long as these two are soul bond, we can essentially just perpetually goad our opponent's creatures throughout the rest of the game until they deal with it. And of course, on top of that, we also just get, a nice little 4/4 human soldier creature token as well that we can swing with. Then, if that attacking creature, happens to die, we drain our opponents with our commander. But yeah, the perpetual goading is really what makes this card incredible in this deck, and it is definitely worthy of the title of Golden Pig. Next up, though, we also have some other ways to make token copies of our commander with Flame Rush Rider and Feldon on the third path. Flame Rush has, when it attacks, create a token that's a copy of another target attacking creature that's tapped and attacking, exile the token at end of combat. So with this one, we actually have to attack with our commander as well, but again, most of the time with our creatures being goaded a ton, we're going to have some openings to swing at players. And actually, with this deck, even if our commander is dealt with, we very well might send our commander to the graveyard, and then we can really make use of it with a card like Feldon. Feldon has pay 2 in red, tap, create a token that's a copy of target creature card in your graveyard, except it's an artifact district with other types. It has haste, sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. So even in our graveyard, our commander is haunting our opponents, and of course we've got other ways to get it back from there. But first, let's talk about another way to really use and abuse that ETB. Because when our commander is about to die, well, we can just cast a card like Supernatural Stamina, Feign Death, and Undying Malice, each of which basically do the exact same thing. Supernatural Stamina says, until end of turn, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains. When this creature dies, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. And then Feign Death and Undying Malice, again, are very similar, but instead of that +2/+0, they come back with a counter. Regardless, for 1 mana each, essentially, again, if our commander is going to die, we just say, okay, our commander died. Oh, it's back! Oh, and its ETB happened again. So yeah, cards like these can be incredibly effective. Speaking of which, we're not done with them just yet because we're also going to be running cards like Undying Evil, Fake Your Own Death, and Minions Return. Undying Evil says target creature gains Undying until end of turn, which basically means that when the creature dies, if it didn't have any counters on it, it comes back and play the +1 counter on it. And then Fake Your Own Death gives that creature +2/+0 and brings that creature back when it dies, and on top of that, we get a treasure token. Finally, though, we've got Minions Return, which has Flash, Enchant Creature. Whenever Enchanted Creature dies, return that card to the battlefield under your control. So keep in mind, this can actually count our opponent's creatures as well. And yes, stealing our opponent's best creatures is definitely a fantastic way to close out the game after we've, had them destroy each other in combat and there's one less standing. But yeah, if we're not at that point yet and we want our commander's ETB again, just, attach this to our commander and have our commander die and get it back. And speaking of our commander dying, well, of course, we can actually force that to happen with cards like Witch's Cauldron, Vampiric Rites, and Shadowheart Dark Justicar. Witch's Cauldron has pay 1 a black, tap, sacrifice a creature, you gain 1 life, and draw a card. And Vampiric Rites is basically the exact same thing, but we don't have to tap it to do so. And then Shadowheart Dark Justicar has pay 1 a black, tap, sacrifice another creature, draw X cards, where X is that creature's power. So although this one does have to tap, we are going to be drawing 4 cards when we sacrifice our commander. Regardless, sacrifice outlets like these are incredible in this deck, because again, if we actually want our commander to die for one reason or another, we just can with these. We can just keep doing it. We're going to keep bringing our commander back, yes, in one way or another, but we can actually just keep getting rid of it again so we can keep getting its ETB again. And we'll talk about those ways to get our commander back outside the ones we've already talked about, but first, let's talk about some more fantastic sacrifice outlets like Dockside Chef, Skullport Merchant, and Thallid Soothsayer. Dockside Chef has pay 1 in black, sacrifice an artifact or a creature, draw a card. Skullport Merchant is going to actually make us a treasure when it comes into play, and we can pay 1 in black, sacrifice another creature or a treasure to draw. And Thallid Soothsayer very simply has pay 2, sacrifice a creature, draw a card. Regardless, each of these again are great ways to just dig through our deck and draw more cards, and obviously get rid of our commander when we need to. So finally, we're also going to be running Legion Vanguard, Bushmeat Poacher, and Vermin Gorger. Legion Vanguard has pay 1, sacrifice another creature. Legion Vanguard explores. Bushmeat Poacher has pay 1 and tap, sacrifice another creature. You gain life, feel like creature's toughness, so that's going to be 3, and draw a card. Well, I should say 3 if that's our commander, but yeah, most of the time we're going to be sacrificing our commander. And speaking of gaining life, well, I'm losing it too. There's Vermin Gorger, which has tap, sacrifice another creature. Each opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. So this is another great way to drain our opponents throughout the game while getting rid of our commander when we want to. But we're actually not done with getting rid of our commander just yet. Because we also have some fantastic spells that can help us out with Dredge, Village Rites, and Altar's Reap. Dredge has a sacrifice a creature or land to draw a card. Village Rites makes us sacrifice 1 creature to draw 2 cards, and Altar's Reap is going to make us do the exact same, but for 1 more mana. And then Skull Tap does the exact same thing at Sorcery Speed. Costly Plunder is an instant and lets us sacrifice an artifact or creature to draw those 2 cards. And then Reckoner's Bargain does the exact same thing, but we also gain life field to sacrifice permanent's mana value. And then finally, we've also got Merciless Resolve, which has us sacrifice a creature or a land to draw 2 cards. Blood Divination, which has us sacrifice 1 creature to draw 3 cards. And Disciple of Bolas, which has, when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice another creature, you gain X life and draw X cards where X is that creature's power. So again, by sacrificing our commander, we're going to be drawing 4 cards and gaining 4 life with this. But of course, outside of Feldon and outside of those ways to get our commander back with cards like Feign Death, well, we've got plenty of other ways to get our commander out of our graveyard. Because we are going to be running an absurd amount of reanimation spells with cards like Infernal Offering, Rescue from the Underworld, and Victimize. And I probably should have mentioned this before, but yeah, it's a lot more cost effective to just keep reanimating our commander from our graveyard and actually getting its ETB that way, instead of sending our commander back to the command zone each time and trying to pay that commander tax, which adds up a ton throughout the game. But yeah, Infernal Offering can actually be a great way to sacrifice our commander and get it back, because it says, choose an opponent, you and that player each sacrifice a creature. Each player sacrifice a creature this way, draws 2 cards. And choose an opponent, return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, then that player returns a creature card from their graveyard to the battlefield. So with this, yeah, you can choose your commander for each of these effects essentially, sacrifice your commander, draw 2, and then say, you know what, let's just bring that right back for that ETB. Speaking of which, Rescue from the Underworld can help us out in a somewhat similar way. As initial cost to cast it, we sacrifice a creature, which can be our commander, and then we choose our creature card in our graveyard. We return that card and the sacrificed card to the battlefield under our control at the beginning of the next upkeep. Or should I say at the beginning of our next upkeep, but yeah, another great way to get our ETB when we need it. And then Victimize is a great way to get back multiple creatures. We choose 2 creature cards in our graveyard, we sacrifice 1 creature, and return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped. Moving on, we've got Zombify, which simply brings our commander back. Makeshift Mannequin, which does at instant speed, but it also has a mannequin counter on it, and when it becomes the target of a spell or ability, we sacrifice it, which is fine with us, because again, we want our commander to go away in a lot of circumstances. And then if we spent at least 3 black mana to cast Cauldron's Gift, we get to mill 4 first, then we bring a creature card from our graveyard back into play with a counter on it. And speaking of milling and reanimating, well, that's exactly what we're going to be doing with Summon Undead, which has us mill 3, then bring a creature back. Whereas Unbreakable Bond is going to have us bring our creature back with a lifelink counter on it. And then Torrent of Souls actually has recharge to 1 target creature card from your graveyard if black was spent to cast it, and creature target player controls get +2/+0 and gain haste until end of turn if red was spent to cast it. So this can bring our commander back and help us hit really hard with our army. And speaking of an army, well, we also have some creatures that can help us out with Bonecaller Cleric, Doom Necromancer, and Young Necromancer. Bonecaller Cleric has pay 3 and a black and sacrifice it. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Doom Necromancer basically does the exact same thing, but by paying a black and tapping and sacrificing to do so. And then Young Necromancer does not need to be sacrificed. It has, when it enters the battlefield, it may exile 2 cards from your graveyard. When you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Regardless, again, we have a ton of fantastic ways to bring our commander back again and again and again to just keep getting that ETB over and over again, and to annoy our friends and also have them take each other out. And speaking of our opponents helping us take them out, our opponents can help us even further with cards like Writ of Return and Dance Macabre. Writ of Return says return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, and it's got Cipher, so we can exile it and encode it onto a creature, and then when that creature hits one of our opponents, well, we can copy it. And of course, with our opponents swinging away at each other, it's going to be really easy for us to get through on at least one opponent. But next up, there's Dance Macabre, which has each player sacrifices a non-token creature, roll a d20, and add the toughness of the creature you sacrifice this way. 1 through 14 is return a creature card put in a graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control, and 15 plus is return up to 2 creature cards that are put in graveyards this way to the battlefield under your control. So with this, actually, we can sacrifice our commander to get itself back, and if we happen to roll high, we can get back another thing from one of our lovely opponents. And speaking of getting our opponent's creatures, well, we can also get them with cards like Beacon of Unrest, Rise from the Grave, and Endless Obedience. Beacon of Unrest says, put target artifact or creature card from a graveyard on the battlefield under your control, shuffle a Beacon of Unrest into its owner's library. And then Rise from the Grave is going to reanimate any creature, and it's also a zombie, which really doesn't matter all that much, but still reanimate any creature, including your opponent's. Speaking of which, there's Endless Obedience, which basically does the exact same thing, minus that zombie part, but it does have Convoke, so it can be cheaper for us to cast. Regardless, yeah, we've got a ton of ways to reanimate a lot of things, including our commander again and again and again. But aside from our commander throwing a massive wrench into our opponent's plans over and over again with, that goad trigger, we also have cards like Shenanigans, Abrade, and Shredded Sails, which can help us out as well in different ways. Shenanigans can destroy target artifact and has Dredge 1, so we can get it back. Abrade can deal 3 damage to our creature or destroy target artifact, and Shredded Sails can deal 4 damage to a creature with flying or destroy target artifact, or we can cycle it away for 2. And then finally, we've got Feed the Swarm and Introduction to Annihilation. Feed the Swarm can destroy target creature or enchantment opponent controls. We lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. And then Introduction to Annihilation is going to exile target non-land permanent. Its controller is going to draw a card, but again, if we really need to get rid of something, this is a fantastic way to do so. But now that we've gone through every single non-land card in this deck, let's talk about the lands. Which won't take us very long because with this budget, we're just going to be running basic lands with swamps and mountains. And now with that, we have talked about every single card in this deck, so let's talk about the price. Which, obviously, like I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode, is $10, and actually it is exactly $10 with that estimated cost. Though do keep in mind that basic lands are not included in that cost, but if you already have those, great, and if not, they are very cheap to pick up. And actually, you might be able to find even more savings with a deck like this by buying this deck on TCG Player and utilizing heavily played and damaged cards, which of course, need a home too. But also keep in mind that this estimated cost does not include the cost of shipping, which might vary depending upon where you live. And with that, this show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.